clean energy is ready, but the market might just not be moving fast enough. If you want to understand what's slowing it down and how to fix it, stay tuned to this episode of the Green New Perspective podcast. Hello friends, you are watching or listening depending on the platform of your choice, the Green New Perspective podcast, where we talk about climate tech/manufacturing innovations and discovering marketing strategies that are fueling growth in this space. One thing we keep coming back to during this podcast is this: great technology scales only when people know how to buy it. Solar storage and EV charging already make financial sense for thousands of buildings, but adoption is still slower than it should be. And it's not because the tech is not ready, it's ready, but the process is slow, often messy, and built for one-off projects. That's what today's guest is focused on fixing. His name is Kevin Berkemeyer, the CEO and co-founder of Station A clean energy marketplace designed to bring data, transparency, and real competition to the clean energy procurement. In this episode, we're talking about why fixing the process might be the fastest way to scale the energy transition. Enjoy the conversation.
This episode of Green New Perspective is brought to you by New Perspective Marketing. For over 20 years, New Perspective has helped future-focused B2B tech companies grow by building thought leadership, attracting better qualified leads, and driving pipeline growth. If you're ready for smart strategies, measurable results, and a partner who's invested in your success, visit npws.com to learn more. Kevin, welcome to the Green New Perspective podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So for those who are meeting you for the first time, can you introduce yourself and the work you're focused on right now?
My name is Kevin Berkemeyer, one of the founders, CEO of Station A. Station A is a clean energy marketplace, and we built a marketplace specifically to make energy transactions more efficient, more scalable, and ultimately more cost-effective. Our goal, the destination that we're driving towards, is to become the number one clean energy marketplace where we originate more energy transactions than any other platform out there.
And what sparked the idea that eventually became Station A?
It was really interesting. So I have a background in on the project side, so solar energy storage, project development, and had a lot of experience finding good sites, originating good sites for different clean energy technologies, and then developing those projects. Our co-founders have a lot of experience in building science and modeling buildings at scale, and then building scalable software platforms. And we kind of all came together with our diverse and different experiences based on our experience with this problem where everybody in the market tries to sell a specific point solution to a customer, to a buyer. Everybody typically approaches that with a pitch, and that pitch is around a menu of options. And so what we saw was a really slow, a really manual process that leveraged a patchwork of different tools, and it ultimately was very costly as well in limiting the market. So given the diverse expertise that we have, the experience that we have, we saw there's there's a totally different way to do it, and that we could flip this model around. And instead of starting with a pitch, we start with data and intelligence and a recommendation around what somebody should do just from the outset and just with an address. And so where we unify and all of these different tools to provide a far more simple experience that enables you to get the data in your hands as quickly as possible, to say, I should do solar on these buildings, I should do storage on these buildings, I should deploy EV charging on these buildings, and here's the exact business case around that. And so the problem of scalability is really why we started this company, and the scalability across clean energy transactions.
So would you say that scalability is the problem in the clean energy space that you were most determined to solve?
Yeah, I think, I come from the school of thought that we have the existing technology that we need in the market already. So we don't need a new bright shiny object necessarily. What we need is a better way to execute, a more scalable way to execute. And by execute, what I mean is, one, understand which options are best on a given site. And then two, to then figure out what are the terms and who to work with to execute that project. And so I think that the problem of scalability is core. We're at 5% deployment across the US in terms of clean energy on buildings, for example. That is a very small number. And there's about at least 500,000 financially viable opportunities out there. It's about $300 billion of CapEx that would be financially accretive and valuable to that building owner or to that site owner. And so why is that market not being tapped? I think it's because we have not built a scalable way to execute these projects. And that's what we're trying to do.
What's interesting about your company, at least for me, is
Yeah.
that from the start, you made a decision based on financial performance. So how much money a project earns, how quickly it pays back, instead of leading with this sustainability story or ESG branding. Why was it important for you to build the business that way?
I mean, inevitably, businesses make good business decisions, right? And what is a good business decision? A good business decision is something that adds value. And so you can add value in a number of ways. And some companies purely make decisions around sustainability, which is great. But most businesses make business decisions around, what drives value in that business. So what reduces your OpEx? So what reduces your operating expenditures? What increases if you're a real estate company, what increases your net operating income on that asset? Those are business decisions, that we want to enable at scale. Now, what's exciting about the clean energy space is that you can make good business decisions that add value to a business and provide sustainability benefit as a whole as well, and energy security and resiliency. So there's a lot of additional value to the business, but you got to start, it has to be a good value prop. It has to make sense from a financial perspective.
And how do your partners react? Was there any skepticism?
Our partners mean like our customers or our...
Yes.
The skepticism around what? Like skepticism around, like, is that true?
When you started the company, around the messaging and around what you're doing overall.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we started out as a data company, so selling access to our data as a prospecting tool to the providers in the market. They would leverage our data to find good sites. And then organically, we actually started to inbound building owners who then were using our data to evaluate their own sites. And then that naturally evolved to them asking us if we could refer them to a provider who could build their project. And that is when we launched a marketplace for transactions. So where we were not just evaluating buildings, but then we were actually like helping define the commercial terms and helping somebody find the provider who could build or finance that project. When we started, the business, everyone was like, this data is great. Like, this is super valuable. It's refreshing to have like an agnostic view into the options. And then it just became a natural evolution for us to then take a step closer to the transaction, to actually then go and solicit bids and compare those bids all within the same platform. And so I'd say a lot of what we've built has been because like the customers have wanted it and have desired it. It's such a no-brainer value proposition really for the customer. And we hear time and time again, it's like, I'm so glad this exists. This is obvious this should exist. I think the one bit of skepticism we had was initially from investors, where like investors were like, this business, the status quo has never changed, too hard to change it, can't build a marketplace, blah, 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 blah. And so I just have like that ingrained in my mind and just to like disprove on a daily basis. But I think what's exciting is that we are actually like disproving, that cynicism, that skepticism. Like we have now listed, over 300 megawatts of projects. So it's over $500 million of project value. We work with some of the biggest real estate companies and biggest corporations in the world, and we are pitching the exact same thing to everybody, and it resonates. And I think that, those are all proof points, I think, that are showing, that this model does work, and people do want a different option. And so I think that's what excites us.
So you mentioned that you're using data and mapping technology to analyze buildings. So how does that make it easier for building owners to decide whether clean energy makes financial sense? And what were they struggling with before you existed?
Yeah. So traditionally, I mean, the status quo would be, you would get that pitch from a provider and they'd be like, hey, I could sell you solar storage, EV charging, demand response, energy efficiency. So this menu of options. And then that provider would say to the buyer, like, you tell me, like, what are you interested in? And the buyer would be like, I don't know. Like, I'm not the expert. You're the expert. Like, you tell me. And then the provider says, all right, give me all of your data. We'll evaluate that and we will come back with a proposal. And those proposals come back, in months, like 6 months, depending on the size of the portfolio. And so when I said we flipped that around, what we did was instead we knew all the inputs to answering the question of what somebody should do. So then we went out, we collected all the data to provide those inputs. So like electricity bill data, 3D size and shape of building. What is the industry type of that building? So then we could predict the electricity consumption. All right, what is somebody then paying for their electricity on an annual basis? Then bringing in incentives and policies, understanding the attributes of the building where there's obstruction on the roof, for example. So then we could size a solar project based on the space available. And then we can model the economics of that system based on latest and greatest project costs so that we produce a recommendation in the first meeting that we talk to somebody. And that is a data-driven recommendation. It's not a menu of options. So that taking that, like what would take 3 to 6 months down to like an instant, a matter of seconds, I think is kind of game changing in how a customer figures out what they should do on a given building. And that is like a core piece of that scalability.
You mentioned that some of the investors were skeptical. So when you were just getting started off the ground, what were you doing on the sales side? How did that work?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, from the investor side, I think that like what we were trying to do is like a first, and it's hard. It's a complex business. I mean, we've gotten a lot better at pitching it, to be fair, and I think the vision has really refined, and I think we've attracted some really like excellent investors. I think we have always been able to sell, and I think sell effectively to the customers like in the market. And I think that that's because we solved just a core challenge and problem that they have, which is like figuring out what to do on a building and then who to work with and doing that at scale and more efficiently. So I think it traditionally has always been a challenge to answer those two questions. And then, providers always want more projects. They want more projects to build, to finance. So our ability to bring them more projects that are well qualified with all the data where they can just focus on execution, I think is a core value add, to that like side of the market too.
And what did that teach you about the market?
I'm sorry.
What did that teach you about the market?
I mean, I think you got to listen to your customers and listen like to the market and get curious. And so like customer discovery is kind of critical. Like I don't think that we've built this business in a vacuum. We've taken efforts to really like balance like, okay, where do we think this needs to go and what do our customers need, and make sure that like we're building things that are valuable to the customers and, that are aligned with where we think this needs to go, and adapt and iterate, and adjust as you move forward and get, new information and new data. And so I think that has been a core growth of the business. We've also just been good at experimentation. So good at discovery, good at testing, seeing what sticks, seeing what works, then building it, at scale and rolling that out more aggressively, but all about iteration, customer discovery, and adapting, making changes, as you get new data.
Most manufacturers have the same challenge: marketing, sales, and finance all looking at different numbers. In this webinar, we'll walk you through how to set up HubSpot so everything connects, letting you see cost per request for quote, pipeline velocity, payback period, and true revenue impact in one unified view. If you want real visibility into marketing's impact, register today.
Like you mentioned, like selling this new category product has its own journey. So what did you learn that other founders should hear?
I think one key lesson, and this is pretty obvious, but is like really understand the customer. And I know it's obvious, and some people like assume like, oh, I know the customer, but I like really define and build like a discovery engine and machine that is really getting to the heart of the customer problem. And then, building a solution that can help solve that problem. And sometimes we've been bad at that. And then sometimes we've been good at that. And I'd say we've been more good at that than bad at that. And we're getting better and better at that, which is important. And then I think that the second thing is, it's like, and this is kind of related, but it's like find those pockets of conviction. It's like, where do you really have conviction that this works? And then once you find that, pocket of conviction, then you really accelerate and lean in or prove that conviction is right. And that for us was always around product market fit. So it's like, do we have conviction around product market fit? When we have that, like, and all we've been doing like in the first stage of our company is like navigating towards that product market fit. And I kind of define that as like, there's obviously demand for what we have, but we're just selling the same thing over and over. And there's a repeatability to it. And once we nail that conviction, then we raised more capital. And now we're really kind of scaling and accelerating that. So I would really just be disciplined about navigating towards that product market fit. before you then like really accelerate.
And you mentioned that Station A is helping de-risk outcomes. In practice, what de-risking actually looks like for your customers?
Yeah, so I'd say there's like three things, three things that that we do, that we do really well. One is the faster upfront analysis. Two is then running like a well-structured, well-designed process to solicit bids and compare bids from the market. And then three, which is part of that process, is de-risking the outcome. And what that really means is that like eliminating surprises. And so what I mean by that is, to dive deeper, is like kind of acting as a fiduciary to the buyer, understanding everything that we can, about a provider's execution plan for a project, their economics, what are the contingencies, but really getting all the data and information out up front so that there are no surprises downstream when you build a project, so that there are no change orders, so that there are no, schedule slippages. What's really interesting is we're starting to survey buyers and providers post-project like execution to then, retroactively go back and say, like, were there change orders? Were there schedule slippages? How did those manifest? Why did those happen? To inform, how we can improve the process up front, but also like, hey, providers, like which providers do not change their proposals or terms, which providers are not issuing change orders, et cetera, so that we give the customer a de-risked outcome at the end of the day.
And what the feedback has been from the customers?
Yeah, I think the feedback has been great. Like we regularly compete against people or we regularly work with customers who already have proposals in hand, and where they're like, oh, we wish we would have met you 3 months ago. And we're like, well, we can still run your projects and your transactions through our marketplace, and you can compare those to the proposals that you have in hand. In every single instance of that, we've won that business. And the reason that we've won that business is because we've done two things. And I think two things well is, one, we've solicited bids from like a broader audience, from highly reputable vetted providers. And so we've gotten more bids. And then the second thing is that we've gotten, more competitive bids. And so we've gotten more bids from reputable providers that are more competitive, and on average about 20% lower cost than what that bid was that person had in hand already. And so I think one of our core values as a company is like show, don't tell. So show with data, right? Don't tell somebody something, just show them the actual truth. And I think our ability to do that and show that outcome with data just makes our customers come back to us for other transactions, more transactions, et cetera. So I think the proof is kind of in that repeatability, like in, the data that is delivering better results and de-risked outcomes for the customer. And so very positive reactions as a result.
I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of debate based on this podcast because we have a lot of guest speakers here from the clean energy market. There was a lot of debate around how incentives shape behavior in the clean energy market. So what's your take, and how do you see efficiency playing into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from the school of thought where I think this business gets the most exciting when we don't rely on incentives. And I also think that we have to track towards, not relying on incentives. I think that's what we are doing as an industry. I think that's what we are striving for as a business. I think that the reality right now is that we still need, some incentive, but that is changing very, very quickly. And what is changing that is, one, rising electricity costs. We're seeing unprecedented increases in electricity costs across every state in the U.S. You've got about 45 states in the U.S. that have reported increases in electricity costs this year. 16 of those are greater than 10%. 4 of those are greater than 20%. There is just a mismatch in demand and supply. There is a dramatic demand for additional electricity generation and more flexible assets like storage. That's just driving price increases. That makes the value prop for solar and for storage on site that helps manage those costs even more attractive, regardless of incentives and policies. And then I think the second thing is, like, we've got to change the status quo. We've got to change the way that we execute these projects. We have to create a more scalable way to do that. And that plays exactly into what we do and the value prop that we have. What we're trying to do is really drive down the cost to deploy, drive down the soft costs, which are like 35 to 50% of a total project costs, so that we don't need incentives. And we can do projects anywhere, just given the market fundamentals. And we're already starting to see that happen in a number of states and markets in the country.
That's good to hear.
Yep.
So you built a structured data set, like you mentioned, of project pricing and provider performance. So how does that create a flywheel that improves every future project?
Yeah. So I'd say we've got, a lot of proprietary data sets. As a software company, everything is structured data. And the reason that is important is then we can use that data to drive insights, but we can also use that to improve our models. And so the structured data that we have is, we've got hundreds of data points for every, specific building to inform a recommendation. But we're also getting a lot of structured data out of the marketplace. And that's project price data, project cost data, project price cost data. That's components, which components are used. It's performance data and track record data of providers. We are now starting to cycle this into that upfront evaluation so that we can say, okay, you should do solar on this building in the state of Arizona because we've run, X number of transactions through Arizona, and here's the project cost data that we're getting from the market. And so here's what we think the economics are based on actual data from the market. Similarly, here are providers in the market who have an expertise in that market, who have won transactions through Station A, who have X number of megawatts deployed, X safety record, et cetera, who would be best suited to actually, that specific project and transaction. So we're really, we're starting to take the data that is coming out of the marketplace, cycle that back into the upfront evaluation, upfront qualification, as well as evaluation qualification of the bids that come in too.
And what have you learned from the data that even surprised you?
I think the things that we've learned that are interesting is you've got the bid spreads are wild. The average bid spread that we see for a given project is 50% of the project cost. It's a huge delta. So that could be about $1 million swing, on the average project between the low bid and the high bid. Huge delta. You also see similar deltas in terms of the execution plan and how long it would take somebody to execute on that project. So it's what's driving these swings? These are, I think, indicative of the fact that some providers are really good in certain markets and some are not. And some add a lot of contingency and some don't. Some are just plain, lying and some are not. And so I think that is why having a transparent process that produces an apples to apples comparison is really important to the customer at the end of the day. Again, going back to de-risk the outcome.
We're going to the end of that conversation. So looking ahead, what would be next for Station A? And what are you most excited to build in the next chapter?
Yeah. So coming up next for us is obviously continuing to build out our core business, so that core marketplace business. But I'd say we look at expansion from that core across two different dimensions. One is horizontal, so doing more to enable transactions and to drive soft costs down. What I mean by that is supporting customers on contract negotiations, helping define what is fair and standard from a terms perspective, providing additional services to the customer to make sure that the outcome is ultimately de-risked and they have no surprises downstream. And then we also look at the vertical. So what are the solutions that we offer? It's solar, it's storage, it's behind the meter, it's front of the meter, it's community solar subscriptions, EV charging, continuing to expand, the vertical solutions that we offer to our customers. At the end of the day, what we do for the customer is not say, we don't want to lean on the scale on one solution. We want to be this agnostic fiduciary to the customer, agnostic to the solution type. The reason that's important is because the customer doesn't wake up and say, I want to do solar everywhere. They wake up and they say, I want to reduce my OpEx or I want to increase my NOI. Where can I do that? And so everything that we're doing is to align ourselves with that goal and that outcome. And so from a vertical solution perspective, we will expand the solutions to align with that outcome. So to help our customers figure out what they should do to achieve that goal, not just through the single lens of solar, for example, but through the lens of the options available, and then help them execute on that. So I'd say that is what is next for us. All this is in the service of being the number one transaction platform in the energy market, and aligning ourselves with the goal and the outcome of the customer is core to that.
And if someone from our audience is open to exploring those opportunities with you, where can they get informed? Where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can come to our website, which is stationa.com. Contact us through there. Email me directly, Kevin@stationa.com as well. And we're happy to help in any way we can. We provide that upfront analysis at no cost. So all we require is an address or just a business name, doesn't matter. And we can just get started with that data, with that intelligence right up front, no barrier to entry, no friction, and start having like a real conversation about real options.
Cool. We'll link all your websites and your LinkedIn to the
Great.
description of this episode. So it's going to be easier for our audience to find you. Well, Kevin, thank you for being my guest here on the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that was good. I hope that was productive.
Thank you for tuning in to Green New Perspective. This podcast is proudly sponsored by New Perspective. We are a Boston-based marketing agency working with Cleantech clients solely for over 20 years now. And if you want to check out how we help our Cleantech clients to grow, you can click on the link in the description of this episode. If you like what we do here with the podcast, giving some amazing people from all over the cleantech space a place where they can showcase their innovative tech aimed at combating climate change, you can support us in so many ways. You can leave reviews, comments, or consider subscribing to our channel on your favorite streaming platform. We've noticed that around 75% of you who are regularly watching our show are not subscribing. So just by hitting that subscribe button, you could help us to grow, to get even more people from the climate tech space and create additional content. So please consider doing that. Thank you in advance. And of course, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.